exploring whether frankly, a process that of storage of flowback that may even be superior to the double line impoundment should be subjected to more rigorous review and standards than the centralized impoundment. Basically offering to amend these rules to incorporate similar storage requirements and permitting for tank farms. Again, that within Chapter 78, so under the residual waste regulations, that's one of the concepts. With respect to centralized impoundments, one of the comments we've gotten, just in general, my travels has to do with air quality emissions from impoundments. Our own short-term studies have not revealed that to be an issue of concern. However, it seems that managing odors from both bacteria and from the removal of hydrocarbons as well as organic compounds before the wastewaters are stored in the impoundment may be something that could eliminate a lot of public concern about whether there's air quality issues there or not. The current regulations only contemplate identification of abandoned wells prior to hydraulic fracturing, and as has been brought to my attention, that is actually not the full scope of the stronger recommendation. They recommend additional considerations, and this is something I think that is worth, again, additional discussion we have. And then lastly, and I was remiss in, I knew I was forgetting one, was for impoundments or pits, at a well site that are going to service multiple wells and could potentially be there for years. Should we be contemplating additional provisions, perhaps more akin to our centralized impoundment with a double line system with leak detection to prevent significant leakage from these impoundments that again can be storing fluids for many months, perhaps even years during the pendency of the operation. So those were just an example of some of the topics of conversation that just came up on our end. I know that there are probably many that came up during your conversations with your colleagues as well. And I think it gives you just an idea, though, of the need for those additional thoughtful conversations before we would jump in and propose to make the modifications. So having said that, what I will do is well, Mr. Chairman, you indicated that you thought perhaps a page-by-page review might be necessary, and I'll defer to you on that. I have got specific pages that I want to present what we have done to provide CAB and members of the public with an understanding of why we made the changes that we made. But feel free to interrupt me as I go.
Well, I think that would be best served if we can just start with page 1 and just go through that. And where you want to see or insert something, let us know. And particularly these 4 items you just mentioned. Are you prepared to offer something for insertion now, or are you basically saying that's something we defer to the subcommittee?
I think we defer to the subcommittees that do not have language to offer. I've considered the department's own reflection on comments received today. And from discussions that we've had internally.
Okay.
So, from my perspective,
Well, let's go back. Comment on the approximate original contour. And under the tab, you guys jump in at any point you feel appropriate. I'm just going to reiterate some of the concerns that were given to me. Under the original land, I think just a point of clarification, you're talking about, on the last line there, can support the original land uses. You're talking about the land uses that were there prior to it being disturbed for oil and gas operations.
that is correct.
Okay. All right. I'm concerned that maybe you were talking about the historic original land use and not what was actually there at the time of disturbance.
So would you recommend a change there?
Well, just support the original land use. You for disturbance for the prohibited activity, something along those lines. Yeah. Okay, anyone else have anything on that page, Tab?
I did want TAP's consideration of our definition of condensate. I believe that is aimed at through API.
Yes, that was originally your comments, so glad to see the change.
Excellent, great. Do you have any comments?
Mine influence water, I have one comment there. The last sentence, the permit also includes surface waters that have been impaired by pollution or mine drainage. I guess the concern is how far reaching are you going with that concept?
The concept, by using the term impaired, what we are referencing and contemplating are those streams that no longer meet their existing or designated uses because they have been impacted by AMD. I mean, basically, they're dead streams. So if they're on the 303D list for failure to meet those existing or designated uses due to impacts from mine influence water, then those are the streams I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, or excuse me, I'm saying we are not talking about the stream that anywhere along its reach has some kind of discharge to it from mine influence water, like the Susquehanna River, for example.
Okay.
So it is limited to those reaches of the streams that have been demarcated in a public way as having been impaired by mine influence water. And the idea being that we do not want to. We want to encourage the use of mine influence water, but we have concerns over its storage. And calling, like for example, the Moshannon River a freshwater stream is not going to work with scientific reality. So that water can be just as poor as water being discharged directly from the mine. So we want to be able to treat water that exhibits the similar characteristics similarly for storage purposes.
Okay. Immediately below that, oil and gas operations, seismic operations. Scott, if you're aware that a lot of the seismic exploration, if you want to call it that, occurs sometimes years in advance of actually going out there and doing something that would be the next step in oil and gas development. So just wanted to point that out, that that seems to be out of maybe a timeline sequence with everything else that you've got in there, including the assessment, site preparation, construction, drilling.
Well, the purpose of this term, and I think it's only used one time, and it relates to PPC plan development, and that also ties into chapter 1 or 2. One of the things that we've been experiencing with seismic operations is that they do not appear to be aware of their obligation to control erosion and sediment while going, using tracked vehicles and the like through the woods. So partly this is an attempt to make them aware of their responsibilities, but if you think it would be, if your comment would be moving it, we could move it to the first, the very beginning of the line as far as putting things in chronological order. But we do think it's important that those operations be included, again, in the context that it's used in earth-moving activities.
I don't think moving is going to make any difference. So, again, argue with your rationale there. Just have for clarification or explanation.
Anything else on page 4? On page 5, we added the definition for regional groundwater table, and this relates to our centralized impoundments allow manipulation of seasonal high groundwater tables without the regional groundwater table, and clarifying what we mean by that.
Okay. Right below that regulated substance, one of the comments Tab received from one of the companies was that regulated substance, if you look at the act that's referenced there, Act 2, that could include fresh water. So,
We could go back to pollutional material. This has been a challenge for us, that we've gotten comments on one side that we should use the term regulated substance, where we had pollutional material before. Kurt, I'll ask you what you think this pollutional substance extends to.
Yeah, I think that we felt that the term pollutional substance was one of the, was used in Chapter 78 prior to these amendments. It was actually less clear in some ways than regulated substance. And you're right, the definition in Act 2 is extremely broad. And in fact, in certain circumstances, I suppose, freshwater could turn out to be a regulated substance, but I think that would be an unusual circumstance rather than a clean one. Certainly, I think if the land recycling program folks were in the room and were asked that question sort of point blank, I don't think that they would say that fresh water or drinking water would be considered a pollution or a regulated substance typically. But you're right, it's a broad definition. I think that the thing that we liked about this one though was that it's a statutory definition, so it's easy to point to, and the General Assembly has said for purposes of remediation of contaminated sites that is an appropriate definition. And I think as the rulemaking moves forward, we can take a look at that and try to figure out if it's narrow enough or if it's too broad. But I think for the time being, it's an appropriate definition to reference.
okay.
Scott, on that page regarding temporary pipeline, I'm a bit confused why under that. You say transport material used for, quote, for the development of a well site. What exactly are you talking about there? I can see water being transported for drilling and fracking, but development of the well site, I'm not sure what you're doing there.
Steve, do you have any thoughts?
Primarily, you're correct. We envision the water. Usually, they pump the fresh water in.
Well, the well site development generally, I would presume you're talking about mostly earth disturbance. I mean, if you develop a well site,
Yeah,
maybe
maybe it's just well development would be the better term.
Or is there anything with dust suppression?
As I said, I've seen it, it all depends on the company when they, if they have the pits ready, sometimes they fill them up while they're still building the site, but the water is primarily used for the well development and not well site development. I think we were trying to be broad because pretty much we wanted to be able to, temporary pipelines being used from the beginning when they start developing the well site to the end when they clean it.
I'm going to recommend we take out that provision because I don't think that you can.
To say well development?
Used for the drilling and or hydraulic fracture stimulation of the well. That's what the pump, I think, talks about the water, pumping the water there. Unless Sam or Gary, other.
How about the second part of that definition though? Because of after the wells have been drilled, there may be frac that they need to use the pipelines for it to get rid of it, transport it somewhere else, so does that still work?
No.
Temporary lines are generally used to bring fresh water into the frac site.
So, some companies do use it to, I've seen companies where they'll have a centralized tank farm and they flow all the fresh water into a site, and then after fracking, they flow all the frack back to the tank farm. So that's what, off the site, yes. They use it, yes, they use the temporary pipelines to flow frack off site. The idea is to, lessen the truck traffic. Then we want to keep number 2 then. Okay.
Well, just a question on item 2 there. Has been restored. What is restored? As what do you mean by that? Does that mean reclaimed? Wells put into production? What do you mean by that?
No, restored as the ENS, the restoration